Delighted to be joined in the studio by Fraser Nelson, former editor of the Spectator magazine, and the author of this, this documentary for Dispatches, Channel 4, called Britain's Benefits Scandal. And I have to say, I did think, because you've been the person who's massively exposed the fact that when our governments have been saying, oh, you know, look how low our employment is, isn't it? Our unemployment is, isn't it great? So many people employed, that actually those figures mask a huge number of people, millions of people who are on long-term sickness benefits, who've just basically been put out on the, the slag heap of life and just left to waste. I think a lot of people watching that documentary last night, and it's still available on Channel 4 to watch, and I do urge people to see it, would think that this was going to be outrage. You know, just absolutely, we're just going to be outraged, and all these horrible, horrible people on the take from the taxpayer. I watched it just feeling sad, really, really sad and despondent throughout, and that is the strongest sense of the people that you spoke to as well, isn't it?
Well, that's what I wanted the film to do, to tell the story through the people affected, because normally these conversations are the likes of you and me trading figures. 3 million on sickness benefits, how many of them are really sick? And the implication
Oh, now, I'm so sorry. Apparently your microphone has just fallen off and people couldn't hear you. If we could grab, that would be a help.
Sorry.
Clip it on and I'll carry on yapping until we can get it back on. Technology, folks? Technology. I think we've got it on. Right, okay. Great. You start again. Sorry about that. Entirely our fault.
Yeah. Well, that is so often the conversation is a bit cliched that anybody who raises this as a problem is accused of basically hating poor people, who are thinking that they're all Skyvers versus Scroungers.
Nasty Tories, nasty right-wingers.
But the point here is that if you let these people speak for themselves, you will find these are good people caught in a bad system. Yeah. Every single person I spoke to wanted to work, and they couldn't understand how so quickly they'd been ushered on to sickness benefits. But
a lot of these people had been in work for years.
Oh yeah, but they go through, typically they go through, say, a mental health episode, which a lot of people do, anxiety or depression. They needed some support, but they wanted to get that support and come back to work. But instead, they end up given a fair amount of money, staying away from work, but the support doesn't come. I spoke to one guy who got the benefits, but he was waiting a year for the NHS mental health diagnosis. Somebody else who's usually they were thinking to themselves that if they do, they all want to go back to work, but they felt if they do, they'd be penalised, that they would lose everything.
And often they would.
Oh yes, exactly. I mean, there was one guy who wanted to train as a plasterer, which is a pretty good career. There's a skills shortage, good salaries, but on day one he was told by the job centre that if he started training, he would lose all of his support, and so he pulled out of a training course. His own sort of escape was thwarted.
The system is trapping people in, and again, it's very easy to say, well, there's people who don't want to work, and I've got a very big issue, particularly with young people being picked, coming out of school or uni without perhaps qualifications that are much use to most people, and basically being picky about their work. I don't think you're in a position to be picky, but a lot of people you spoke to just, as there was a single mum. Who she'd had an 8-year-old and she'd had disability, and was basically just told, if she tries to do anything, tries to get back to work of any sort, then she will lose all the benefits. And again, it's not just the benefits they're on your lot, and a lot of people will say, oh well, how can they live? These benefits are very low, but actually. If you're on the top rate of sickness benefit, your documentary revealed, and this was something I think most people didn't know, was that you actually got $3,000 a year better off than if you're on a minimum wage job. Well,
the single
which is crazy.
The single mother you mentioned said that she would need to earn £35,000 to replicate her benefits.
Because once you're taxed, and you lose all things like free school meals.
There's a whole they pile up, because typically you'll get your universal credit. On top of that, you get housing. Then you get the sickness component. Then you get on top of that PIP, to help with
personal independence
payments. And then on top of that, then you can get other things. If you're a mother, you can get a child allowance. If that child has got learning disabilities or other disabilities, that can go up. So this is the system which, as a society, we have built for them, and it's almost like a choice. If you want to work, then good luck to you, because we're going to tax you and tax you quite a lot. That's going to increase, and it's not very stable, and it doesn't. The chances of actually growing aren't that great as ones are. However, if you go through this door with sickness benefit, you get security. You get now, we're not doing this out of greed. They are basically being pretty much ushered through the door, and so those I spoke to were actually willing to take less money simply to join the world of work. But all the various campaign groups, the advisory groups, are wanting to put people on benefits. There's very little support for those wanting to come off.
But I've always thought one of the biggest problems we've got when people want to try and reform the benefit system is that they think for some reason that people who are on benefits or people who are in low income, erratic work, that they are motivated by completely different reasoning or rationales than the rest of us. And that's not true. How many people would genuinely choose to go and do a job? And a lot of these people, again, they're never going to get off a minimum wage job, realistically. A lot of these people may, and a lot of that work is often, really not enjoyable work. It's not, it's not going to be pleasant, easy going. It's not sitting shuffling a bit of paper in a nice warm office work. And then they've got a choice of being on the same money or even more for not working. You can understand why people make those choices. Let's play a little clip of one of the people you were talking to. This is Gavin, who was a taxi driver. And Gavin had actually, Gavin had been working, and then he'd had open heart surgery. So he genuinely was unable to work, and he absolutely, he got on sickness benefits, and then he wanted to go back to work. And here's the exchange that you had with him.
So you're working part-time now, and you're getting long-term sickness benefits. So what's the combination of those two compared to when you were working full-time with no benefits?
It's no different. So I'm probably working half the hours for the same money.
Right. So there's no financial incentive for you to get out of a situation at all?
None at all. None at all.
So why are you here? Why are you talking to me?
Because I wanted to highlight how bad things are.
Now, it's interesting, Gavin there, he could choose to go and work full-time, but he won't be any better off and probably be a bit worse off in terms of,
No, the other thing is he's been trying for 3 years to call up the DWP and say, look, I'm better now, I don't need this benefit. He was told, no, it doesn't work that way, you need to be reassessed. And he's like, when's that going to happen? No answer. 3 years, he's given up contacting them.
And this is not an unusual case that's suddenly slipped through. He kept contacting. He didn't just go, well, I wrote one letter, done.
No. He said it's several contacts, and he showed us all the correspondence, and it was just jaw-dropping. They don't seem to be able to compute. That's when people want to say, look, I know financially I'm better off here, but I don't need it, so I don't want it. I'm used
to working, I want to go back and work. But the interesting thing is you discover, is you talked to a lot of experts in this, and, getting the Cabinet Secretary, Department for Work and Pensions, responsible for all of this. I've not got great hopes that they're going to deal with it. I'll come to that. But that actually, only 1 to 2% of people who have got on the higher rate of sickness benefit ever come off it because the disincentives are so strong. But also that in terms of these reassessments, they used to do them. They used to reassess people every now and then during lockdown, they stopped doing them because, of course, no one could work in the public sector in lockdown. And they haven't done pretty much any since.
That was one of the real staggering discoveries. At the peak, 700 people a day, roughly speaking, were being moved after reassessment off sickness benefits. Now that figure is barely 10 a day. It seems that they've just stopped happening. I spoke to an assessor who was saying that, yes, technically it's my job to do a reassessment, but nobody ever fails a reassessment. Now, I'll tell you what I think. I've spoken to also a couple of ministers here who were saying, look, the system's out of control. Like, they were in the department, they could see
Melstride, former Work and Pensions Secretary.
Yeah, Melstride tried to reform it, but he was said, look, Minister, you're going to get a judicial review, they're going to see you in the courts. This system isn't really yours to change. You can make it change, it might happen next year, it might happen the year after that. So you've got a system now where the Conservatives and the Labour both admit that this system is a complete failure for those. But to reform it, it's now out almost as if it's out of government's hands. So you're seeing, so everybody seems to have given up, mainly on the reassessments, and also thinking, OK, this is obviously disastrous, let's just continue on shoveling people onto this system and maybe it's going to be reformed. But Liz Kendall told us last week that she's planning a review in the middle of
another review, one of the 67 or so we've had from this government?
And so the thing is, as every day we wait, there are something like 3,000 more people being added.
Every day?
Every working day, yes. That is.
Sorry, can we all just... Every day in this country, another 3,000 people go on to sickness benefit who are likely to never come off.
There are approved for it. Now, that might be people who are due to come off but were put back on or extended, but that's still 3,000 a day. Wow. That is a lot of people. And,
and it's almost 3 million now, and it's going to go up to 4 million by the end of this Parliament.
It's 3.3 million now, and the forecast is for 4.1 million in just 4 years' time. When you think of what... Now, set aside the economic cost of that. Yeah. Look at the social cost to communities, to people, to wasted opportunities. This is what we are doing to our own workforce. By and large, people who don't want to end up in this destination, they want help. They wouldn't mind NHS.
No, there will be some people. There will be some people.
Sure, there will be some, but right now...
You also looked at websites and you looked at online videos and spoke to people who talk about how people can look online how to game the system. Yeah. If you say, I feel suicidal every day...
The system is open
You're going to... wide open to abuse. You can get on the sickness benefit. You can claim, as we know, people in the old days, there are various things used to claim. For years, it was back pain. And back pain was the key one because I can't tell whether you've got back pain or not. You can't tell, well, I've got back pain. How can anyone assess that? And now it's there was stress for a long time. Now it's depression and anxiety and people having suicidal thoughts. These things do go and change your pants. Do we think that society has changed so much? And if you look at international comparisons, come on, we have a scale of sickness benefit claiming which is off the scale compared to any other Western European country.
Well, when you look at all the countries, you do see that mental health problems are going up worldwide, antidepressant use worldwide. So this is the many ways the problems are across the world. But when you look at sickness benefit claims, they've been going down in most countries while ours have been surging. No other country for which there are records, the Institute of Fiscal Studies looked at this, nowhere comes close to Britain for this problem. So when you think of the solutions, you can pretty much throw a dart on a map and find a country doing it better than us. Nobody is seeing this going up as much as we are. What is lacking is perhaps political will, but I do think Liz Kendall is serious about this.
But no one can go into government or leave government, they'll also say, saying we need to get this country growing, we need to improve things, without tackling this issue. We've got an ageing population, we've got a very low birth rate. The demographics alone mean that we need everyone of working age working. Full stop, end of.
We cannot afford to squander the human talent in the way that we're doing.
And the lives. I mean, this thing, life on the dole is an empty, dispiriting life, where people literally, they live shorter lives. People live less healthy, shorter lives. We know it has a devastating impact on their children in terms of their outcomes for their lives as well. The human cost of this, forget the economics, forget the money, forget the tax, forget the benefit. The human cost of this is absolutely tragic. This is like one life to live, utterly wasted. But here's the problem. I'm going to read out a quote from Labour, well, former Labour. Is she Labour MP this week? She is a Labour MP this week. Diane Abbott. I know some would wish she wasn't. She's tweeted this. Now, this suggests to me she ain't seen the documentary. She said, Fraser Nelson's documentary demonises people on benefits, says it's a scandal, but the real scandal is the super wealthy avoiding billions of pounds by tax evasion. What's your response to that?
This encapsulates the problem. Like, this problem arose because of neglect, because people don't want to talk about it. The people that I sought to give voice to in this documentary are never heard from, always invoked, but never actually consulted. Now, the problem here is that Conservatives get scared away from this, or anybody who wants to reform it gets scared away because you're accused of demonising or hating poor people. There's no way you can watch that documentary and say that anybody was demonised.
I mean, genuinely, Diane Love, if you're going to comment on something, watch it first, because you've made yourself look really, really stupid.
But in a way, that's actually quite helpful, because this encompasses... So the problem is we haven't discussed this. Now, I remember when I was growing up, there's a guy called Rabbi Lionel Blue who did Thought for the Day on Radio 4, and one of his phrases was moral long-sightedness. That's the ability of seeing problems thousands of miles away or decades into the future, like global warming, while not being able to see the problems in your own front door. Now, that thought has stayed with me, because I think in journalism we ought to be here to redress that, to try to look at the problems, to see what's in front of your nose can be a huge struggle. And we've looked past these people for so long. We've started,
it's more convenient.
And anybody who tries to draw attention to it has been accused of hating the poor. But meanwhile, look at what we're doing to our communities. Look at what we're doing to these people. I don't see why this should be a right or a left-wing issue. This is just about compassion, about social cohesion.
Well, let me bring Tom Slater in on this, because, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I think that is... Fraser Nelson's addressed all those issues, but this abject failure of the right to tackle this, I mean, God, Ian Duncan Smith, my God, he made a good effort at it. He really doesn't get enough credit for that. But on the left, this very patronising attitude. Something you at Spike write about a lot. It's a very patronising attitude from the sort of the modern left towards working class people, which does involve sort of like, you know, writing them off and sort of in a way implying, well, all they're good for is benefits.
No, absolutely. I think there's been a shift away from actual working class Labour politics towards just welfareism, to the idea that it's the point of the left to just keep as many people on state support, despite the human costs that you've described, despite the fact that this is not what ordinary people themselves actually want. But I was quite struck, I haven't seen the documentary yet, but I've read a lot of work that you've done on this topic, as to how geographically concentrated it is as well. It's not just vast swathes of citizens kind of spread across the country. Whole communities, places like Grimsby, Blackpool, etc.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Grimsby, 53% of people living on full-time on benefits.
That's the East Marsh and Port area.
So we essentially have kind of whole communities almost being written off. And there's a lot of that, I guess, a missing part of the picture here to a certain extent, that this isn't just about people getting trapped in the system, it's also places in which there might have previously been kind of stable, working class, reliable jobs, and all of that's kind of
and nothing's been replaced.
And that's so important, because Grimsby used to be a thriving port area, but that, and by the way, when I was looking at these block spots, what really sort of made me sick was thinking 20 years ago they were the same places. We've been talking about this for 2 decades, and yet the lives of these people has simply got worse. The welfare model, as we're currently doing it, is making things worse rather than better.
Let's try and end on a positive note. I don't think things, I have to say, I've got no hopes whatsoever that this government's going to deal with it, but the last government failed to deal with it, and basically, you know, the help that people got during lockdowns, you know, it was just, you actually ended up trapping people rather than helping people in this. We've seen this explode since then. What could actually make a difference?
Well, I'll tell you with a positive note that Barnsley Council has done the best report into this. It worked out that if those who on out-of-work benefits who say they'd like to work were joining the workforce, then that would be 4.5 million extra workers nationwide. We would have the best economic growth in Europe. We could have the lowest income tax in Europe with that revenue. This is a massive unused economic resource.
When people say they like to work, I often feel though that people say, well, yeah, I like to work. What jobs are you willing to do? And that's the issue. Or are you capable of doing? There'll be, because again, I've always found it very strange that a lot of people who apparently have problems and can't go into work, well, yeah, but we've got all these jobs at home now, so why can't you do those jobs? It seems to me, one of my best friends worked at a benefits office for the last 20 years, and I always said, well, how can you tell if someone really wants to work or not when they first sign on the dole? The dole being different from sickness benefit, I realise, and she said to me, oh, you can always tell if they want to work. You don't see them again. Because they come in, they sign on, and then they get themselves a job.
But then again, I do think we need to look at how much low-paid work pays. I mean, the work for the care homes get away paying skilled people unskilled wages. The government is taxing, and by the way, the freezing national insurance thresholds and the rest of it is going to tax more. Right now, the incentives are wrong. You should be doing a lot more you can to make work pay, and I think that's absolutely part of it.
The trapping. There's the actual physical, literally saying to somebody, would you like to go into work and be poorer and possibly face losing your home and your kid being able to eat at school.
Increasing taxes every year. That's what they plan on making national insurance thresholds start at £5,000. That's devastating for somebody who gets up at like 4 in the morning to clean offices. I would say the government's got no entitlement to the money that women earn at all, and I think we need to significantly cut taxes for those at the bottom to make work pay more. This is about social repair, not just economic repair, but we will not get anywhere as a country unless we make proper use of our own talent.
And also, if you're going to be in government, whichever party you are, surely, stop worrying about people like us, we'll be fine. But worrying about those people at the very bottom, that is surely is that the reason why you should go into politics? And it doesn't just mean another handout, it means helping people up.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that Liz Kendall understands this. And I think that Rachel Reeves loves to work out for all the money that she's borrowing and spending. And the OBR said, it's not going to move the economic dial because, by the way, you've run out of workers. And this is the problem. There is no more capacity.
We don't need to import people. We've got plenty of people here not working that we're paying for.
And if you remedy this, then you can get economic growth. They will have to fix this because, quite simply, there is no alternative.